Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to Accelerating the Journey to Smart, Connected, and More Sustainable Communities. Good afternoon, everyone. We are thrilled to have you join us today for this exciting webinar. Whether you're seasoned or just learning about this topic, we have a wealth of insight and information for you today. I'm Michael Suarez, the marketing specialist with Smart Cities Connect, a brand of Tech Connect, and I'll be your host for today's session. Before we dive into our engaging discussion, let me quickly run through what you can expect during our time together. Firstly, we have a great panel of speakers who will bring a wealth of experience and expertise. They'll be sharing their insight and offering valuable perspective. In order to have a smooth presentation, the audience will be on mute. Following the presentation and discussion, we'll open the floor for questions from the audience. We encourage active participation, so please feel free to submit your questions through the chat or Q&A feature. We'll do our best to address as many questions as possible during our Q&A. Without further ado, let's kick off today's webinar on accelerating the journey to smart, connected, and more sustainable communities. Today's speakers are Matthew Britt, General Manager of Smart Cities and Communities at Honeywell, Ron Matson, Senior Account Manager, Smart Cities and Communities at Honeywell, Tara McAdam Castle, Co-Founder and Managing Partner at Essence Cities, Heath Melton, President of Phoenix Region, Howard Hughes Corporation. I will pass it on over to Ron.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled to have you join us, and we're anxious to get through this next hour or so. I wanted to just share briefly, we invited Tara and Heath to join this webinar. I just wanted to give you a little feedback and background on it. I invited Tara to join from Ascent Cities, as she's been instrumental on some of the largest and most successful and known smart city projects, around the country. And Tara and her team have supported Honeywell's smart city team on engagements both with customers and prospects, and her insights and her team's capabilities are really second to none. So we appreciate the value she brings. The Ascent City platform, brings an end-to-end program management delivery system in many ways, from a consulting perspective, from advisory services to blueprint strategies, energy optimization, facilities and infrastructure, financial modeling, which is important, down into several more, but into smart cities as a service. So thanks, Tara, for joining us. And I invited Heath. I reached out to Heath to join us for a couple of reasons. First, the Howard Hughes Corporation works as an owner-operator, so they have a long-term vision in mind for all the projects, which is quite unique in the industry. Second, I hope I get this right, Heath. You have somewhere around 8 master plan communities around the country, and perhaps the most successful and long-lasting, the Woodlands outside of Houston. Looks like you're going to be celebrating 50 years since groundbreaking. So a great success with 115,000 residents, and a great story to be told there. In addition, Heath has the opportunity to lead the build out of a city from the ground up with Howard Hughes. They've broken ground on 37,000 acres of a master plan community outside Phoenix called Teravalis. And when I first spoke with Heath about the project, he said something to the effect of he looks forward to building out what they see to be the next greatest city in the United States. Areas of focus for this, there's a lot of areas, but from my perspective, he's talking about best-in-class network for all tenants and residents. He wants to incorporate the latest and greatest leading-edge technologies into the community, and there's several initiatives around sustainability, smart, and so forth for this particular project. So it's a very exciting project, very large project. So, Tara, let's start with you. Can you share a little bit about some of the projects you've worked on, the vision, the budgets, challenges that your team has faced?
Yes, happy to share a bit about Ascent Cities, and thank you so much, Ron, and thank you, Michael, and the Smart Cities Connect team for hosting us today. Ascent Cities is a woman-owned consultancy, and really what I think sets our approach apart is the fact that we leverage a wide range of disciplines in the execution of our projects to bridge the digital and the physical. Everyone on our team comes from a diverse background, from real estate development, finance and marketing, to architecture, planning and engineering. And our team members have pedigrees in some of the leading real estate technology and AEC firms globally, including Lendlease, AECOM, Stantec, Delos, and USGBC. So we approach smart cities, campuses, and infrastructure projects through a problem-solving lens, really working to understand the user needs and developing integrated solutions that incorporate diverse perspectives and enable the exploration of ideas from various angles. Ron mentioned our team has been involved in some of the leading smart cities executions globally, everything from NEOM in the Middle East to projects in New York, work on Hudson Yards, and a number of smart communities around the country. And really what we try to do is focus on how do the technology solutions really meet a stringent set of criteria that are going to set it apart. This is not technology for technology's sake. We look at technology as an enabler. And for us, every solution that we put into place needs to respond to several key elements, from safety and security, equity and wellness. Achieving operational efficiency is always key for our clients. Thinking about the user engagement piece and how can we really enhance the experience overall. Financial sustainability is absolutely central to the equation. If we can't get it to pencil, it's never going to move forward. And then the concept of future-proofing and resiliency. We have so much happening on the technology front. Everything is changing very quickly. How do we make sure that what we're putting into place for our smart city clients is really going to stand the test of time and serve them over the long haul? But overall, I would say our approach to smart cities is designed to achieve our clients' broader business objectives and ESG goals while improving quality of life for residents and visitors.
Very good, Tara. We appreciate all you've done with us. Keith, can you share a bit about your project, the vision, budgets, challenges, and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. Heath Melton, as Ron had introduced me as the president of the Phoenix region for Howard Hughes. So just give you guys a quick overview of Howard Hughes if you don't know a whole lot about us. So we say is we develop premier master plan communities, commercial properties from Wall Street to Waikiki. We have the Seaport District in New York, beautiful backdrop, the Brooklyn Bridge. We have downtown Columbia, Maryland. The 3 master plan communities in the Texas market, which I had the pleasure of overseeing for the last 7 years. The Woodlands celebrating its 50th year with 28,500 acres, about 125,000 people living there today. Bridgeland, currently the number 6 selling master plan community in the nation, about 11,500 acres in our 16th year of development. And the Woodlands Hills, small for us, but large for many at 2,000 acres. We also have Summerlin in Las Vegas, that's 22,500 acres, edging into our 40th year of development there. And then War Village in Waikiki, Hawaii. And last, but certainly not least, as Ron introduced us, the 37,000 acre property in the Phoenix West Valley, which we call Terra Vallis.
Fantastic. Thank you, Keith. Thank you. Next up, we have Matthew. Matthew, our leader for Connected Smart Cities. So you deployed some 80 smart city projects around the globe. And Matthew has a fantastic relationship with our global team, as well as getting a perspective from directly from the clients. So Matthew, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thanks, Ron, and thanks, Tara and Heath, for giving such a great overview of, the awesome things you guys have been doing in this space over, the past many decades, really. So I'm Matthew Britt. I'm the global general manager of the smart city business at Honeywell. So I'm responsible for, everything we do in the United States, but also, around the world. Like Ron said, we've deployed over 80 smart cities globally so far. Been in the business about, a decade or so, primarily to start with, focusing around, public safety, emergency response, helping make, cities safer and improve quality of life on that end. But, really over the last, 5 or so years, we really expanded our business, to more, of a real end-to-end people-centric, one where, we have taken the public safety use case and started incorporating in virtually everything that one thinks about typically when you think about smart cities. And so we've got extremely large deployments like the new administrative capital of Egypt that's being built, where our technologies are being deployed to essentially run the new city end to end. We are, the platform provider for smart cities and, cities like Bangalore, India, city of over 11 million people, helping improve response times across the city, to help improve quality of life by essentially helping helping, the first officers and, public safety officials, get where they need to be, more efficiently, effectively, to be able to serve their people better. But over the last couple of years, we really started also focusing on, what we call, at least in my business, the smart community segment. The private developers out there that are, creating these, really exciting, large scale developments, for people to go live, work, and play. And so, it brings a little bit of a nuanced set of challenges there, that you have to, think about, and as you go planning out the community. You have many of the same pieces of infrastructure that are in place, when you think about a smart city, but typically it's, just smaller in scale. But when you're thinking about, having both your commercial, developments, your buildings, commercial office buildings and like residential, buildings and, public realm assets, like, whether it be arenas or stadiums or, amphitheaters, what have you. How do you do that? How do you meet, resident and tenant and visitor demands for new tech? Right. There are new developments coming up every single day, it seems like, all around the world. And so, when you're ultimately competing against, different cities and different developments, how do you differentiate yourself, to create that environment where, a resident would want to come to live, attract corporate tenants, to be able to, to fill the buildings that you're, building, and how do you do it in a sustainable way? And so, one of the things that, Honeywell, I think is really great about is, we have our smart city solutions. We've had our City Suite platform that's been, deployed as Ron mentioned, over 80 times so far, but we do everything really, with sustainability in mind, right? And so, given that, commercial office buildings are responsible for upwards of, 40% of global CO2 emissions, how can you, effectively optimize energy consumption within the building without compromising the occupant experience? How can you do all of that with, to maximize your operating income, without, sacrificing, and sustainability elements and, other things that are really important to the people that you serve there. So, we're really excited about, being in the space. We're excited about the webinar, and having everybody on the call here, and exploring this deeper.
Awesome, great. Well, I kind of want to go into a little bit of a discussion. I have some questions just to kind of guide the discussion, but please feel free to weigh in. Also, just a reminder to the audience members, please also feel free to submit any questions on the control panel. My first question is for Tara. Your team has been involved in numerous smart city and connected community projects. So from an advisory perspective, how do you see this field evolving?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Michael. I would say, I really feel like the stakes are higher than ever before, right? There's a lot of excitement about the potential of technology in the built environment, particularly when we're looking at what's happening in terms of AI and machine learning. A lot of excitement brewing, but in some instances, you could take a step back and say we've yet to see wide-scale adoption, and in some cases, we've also seen some high-profile projects that have encountered resistance. And I think that's directly tied to the perception of value, right? As I mentioned before, it really can't be about technology for technology's sake. And we have to be solving for specific challenges with really, having an unyielding focus on the ROI for every technology implementation. And even thinking about it through a marketing lens, which is a bit unusual, right? But how can technology really help a development to attract the right partners and corporate campuses? These are the types of questions we see our clients struggling with, right? How will technology enhance the end user experience and really provide the type of differentiation that's going to encourage repeat visits? How do we monetize? How do we create cost offsets that make technology viable over the long term? And then most importantly, and something that oftentimes gets ignored, but how do we communicate the value proposition and generate buy-in from key stakeholders so that we can ensure the project remains viable and moves forward? In short, creating unprecedented value, I think, will ultimately drive demand, and we have to be willing to examine new ways to achieve this and look at new models to deliver it. We're working on a really exciting project with Honeywell right now for the Atlanta Beltline, and I really believe that project will transform how we think about public realm in the United States and beyond. And they have some very specific requirements that they're thinking about in terms of economic development, bridging the digital divide, and concerns about equity. And it's really compelling how you can look at different technology solutions and how they can achieve that, but to make sure that it is responding at every key touch point in terms of the communities that surround the Beltline, and what we think will be a draw for visitors from other areas as well.
Great, thank you. Heath, I know that you mentioned a little bit earlier, but here, the Howard Hughes Corporation has several very successful projects, master plan communities across the country. Could you give a quick overview of the Teravalis from a size, scope, and scale perspective?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a lot of times we talk about our community, Teravalis, 37,000 acres. That doesn't really resonate with most people. They don't understand what that means. So we talk about it in square miles, 58 square miles. And even then, sometimes that still doesn't resonate. So you think of Spokane, Washington, Irvine, California, Frisco, Texas, St. Louis, Missouri, or 2 times the size of Alexandria, Virginia from a population standpoint, or 4 times the size from a landmass standpoint. That's what we're building. We are building a city, and I usually say small city. People correct me and say, no, you're actually building a city. We'll be a population of over 300,000 people that live in our community at full build out, 55 million of square feet of commercial space. So it is a sizable undertaking for us, and we're excited. All of our communities that we've had that I talked about, the Woodlands, Summerlin, that have 30, 40, 50 years of experience behind us, we've been able to embrace those technologies, lessons learned, and we're going to incorporate that into what we do. And at Howard Hughes, we like to say, we like to live on the cutting edge, not necessarily the bleeding edge, but the cutting edge. So how do we really extract that return on our investment for everything that we do? And if I was to ask somebody here in the room, what does it mean to be a smart city? We'd probably get 100 different definitions of what a smart city means. That's going to continue to evolve. But as we go back to like our 4 tenets of our DNA, one of them is masterful design. So we know that we have to plan, plan, and plan again, because our projects aren't 3 years or 5 years, they're decades long. And one thing we know that's constant is change, and being able to have that built-in flexibility to where we can adapt with the changing environment is extremely important to us. As Ron talked about early on, planning for infrastructure. That's from a mobility standpoint. How do we transition from traditional mobility today to what we think will happen in the future? Obviously, autonomous vehicles are going to be a big part of that. Electric vehicles. How do we create that into our built environment today? Making sure that we have charging stations at our commercial locations, at our amenity centers, and that every single family home that we build is EV ready. That's important to us. That's important to our consumers. That's important things that we factor into the environment. As we think about that level of technology, again, wanting to be best in class. If 1G service is the standard, we want to be 2G service to every house. And really becoming part of the ownership of that infrastructure is going to be important to us. As we look at all the different housing types that are out there, we know that there's a need for sale, there's a need for rent, and there's going to be some hybrid models, and we're exploring all those as well. As we go into the built environment, our focus on things like LEED. This is going to be a LEED certified community, just like the Woodlands is today, and Bridgeland in Texas is as well. We'll make sure from a planning standpoint that we can achieve LEED, and we build our own commercial properties. Our goal is LEED, and LEED Silver is kind of our stretch goal. And what we do from a design guideline standpoint, we can control what the residential builders do. So things like the EV chargers, that's paramount for us. When we think about technology as it relates to water conservation, we're going to embrace that. We're targeting a 30 to 35% in water reduction from the baseline. And you don't get there by not embracing technology. Things like WaterSense program, that's an EPA-backed certification process, that's our standard. So all those things that we talk about communities or smart cities, those are the things that we're going to embrace and really bring into the fold of Teravalis.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I'm from Texas, but I live South Texas, and my best friend lives here in Houston. So every chance I get, I want to visit the Woodlands, and I'm always so excited to see like the new stuff that is happening. It's always ever changing. So that's amazing. Yeah, I can attest to how great that is.
Before we jump off that, Michael, I was in Texas for the last 7, almost 8 years of my career. Love Texas. They always say everything is bigger in Texas. Now I can tell all my colleagues in Texas, not everything.
Awesome, thank you. Matthew, given Honeywell's long history in comprehensive smart city projects, what is your vision on applying a smart cities methodology to the private community?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting for me because when you think about smart cities and the kind of challenges that we're trying to solve, right, and make both the lives better, of the people that live there, but also, just generally speaking, modernizing the aging infrastructure that exists within a city. The same concepts apply within the community as well, right? So, when we look at it kind of from a segmentation standpoint, they're so close. I mean, you heard Heath say, he's talking about a city that's going to be larger than many other cities that we view to be big cities today, right? Like St. Louis. So, it's similar challenges, just, sometimes with just a little nuances here and there. So, the thing that I like about it is, it really embraces, that which, we thought long ago, which was, I mean, cities are about people at the end of the day, right? How do you serve the people that live there? How do you make them want to, visit your city, get corporations to move there, relocate there, and there's a bunch of ways that happens, right? But it involves investing for the future. Heath mentioned EV, right? I'm a new recent EV driver myself, right? I see more and more of them on the road today. Yet when I go to many developments that have been in place for quite some time, there's really no infrastructure there for me to charge my vehicle when I go. And so, particularly the developers like Howard Hughes that are, still actively developing new communities, and there are lots of them out there, that it's very refreshing to see that they are really trying to embrace, those kinds of trends that, are really going to drive the interest in, people visiting. So, I think when you think about, kind of the amenity space, right, being able to leverage all of that data that exists to help you make better decisions as you're operating that community. Because, as Howard Hughes being an owner operator as well, right, you gotta build, but then you also got to maintain it over time. Like you're not, just handing it off to, an HOA somewhere, and so, I think taking it from a people first approach, incorporating and integrating all of the myriad and terabytes and petabytes of data that you're collecting via, whether it be, public safety networks throughout there, parking sensors, traffic sensors, EV management, being able to leverage all of that together really enables you to create a differentiated experience because you're able to know what you need to do to either, whether it be fix something in advance, of something breaking, or really just kind of see those trends over time more efficiently or effectively than you previously did before, in absence of harnessing that data. I think additionally, I think that where from an equity standpoint, Tara mentioned the project that we have, that we have going on in Atlanta with the Atlanta Beltline, right? I mean, the disadvantaged communities of this country and around the world, are disproportionately affected by, virtually every challenge that we face in as a society, right? Whether it's, climate change, causing, different issues with extreme weather and, being able to, provide shelters or, just being able to continue to provide, city and community services, thinking about how you can create a resilient infrastructure for your community is also extremely important because if you've got for some of these developments that may be in disadvantaged communities, you have to be able to to really be able to continue to serve those people, because a lot of people don't have someplace else to go, right? And so really designing communities citizen centric, with those people in mind, I think is going to, help really improve, our cities, not just the communities that are being built, but the cities writ large. be able to serve the population better.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of want to remind everyone for the audience, if you want to continue to, if you have any questions based on the discussion, we'll have a few minutes afterwards to answer any of those. Ron, could you explain Honeywell's approach to a new project looking to create a smart, connected, and sustainable community?
Yeah, I think we're all looking to leverage technology to improve the lives of those within the community, and then bring efficiencies to the operations of the community for the developer to save them money and people time and all the rest. So in my world, I focus primarily on the public realm. So the approach that you take may depend on the scale of the project. It may depend on the maturity of the project. If you're dealing with a greenfield project, as an example, one approach may be to begin with the feasibility study, analyzing the current state of the environment versus the, kind of the desired state, always keeping the end goals in mind. And then you start working backwards to identify the technologies that support those ends. You can engage in that process, engage the different personas, that'll be a part of the community, whether it be residents, whether it be tenants, whether it be guests. They all have different needs when they come into the community, right? So then you kind of go down the path of a day in the life of that individual. And our max outcome team would be having that dialogue with each of these personas, understand the day in the life, and then start working backwards to identify those technologies that will fit that day in the life and optimize their day. So there's always going to be your standard base things that people are going to look for. Safety and security. You can say, okay, we're going to do a smart city. First, you need to have the infrastructure in place, right? It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, for technology. And then you move on to safety and security. That's the first thing you have to do before you move on to the next step. So that's where you may start. So anyway, after you get the feasibility study, you've identified the technologies. Perhaps you've provided a rough order of magnitude to deploy all these technologies. You then might look at prioritizing the top 10, top 20, right? Second, you should consider creating a technology master plan, right? So, creating minimum standards across the community for the different asset types. The last thing you want is a sub-developer to come in and start cutting corners and doing things that aren't going to adhere to the vision that's been laid out by by a development. So that technology master plan can be used and as kind of as a blueprint really for the sub-developers to adhere to the vision that's been laid out by the developer.
Awesome, thank you for that. Tara, there's so many changes happening, and I think it's in our natural instinct to sometimes just be concerned or aware of like all the changes that are happening. And so what are some of the things that you're seeing that are top challenges for real estate owners and what they're facing? And how can smart city technologies solve some of these issues?
Yeah, I think it is quite interesting, and Heath mentioned how Howard Hughes is adapting to a rapidly changing environment. And look, you have developers that are on the spectrum of smart cities in terms of minimal implementation all the way through to the level that Howard Hughes is taking it at the forefront of the industry. I think we're starting to see an increase in consumer demand for these technology-enabled environments, and really, development is a balancing act, as we know, right? I think developers are working hard to keep up with the demand for smart environments, and also really focusing in on how do they do so and still adapt to what can be changing market conditions that we're seeing right now, right? When it comes to specific challenges, I think developers really need deep insights to guide their investments. Where do they want to invest? What's most critical when we look at changes that are happening as far as mobility and energy and other technologies that can actually have a huge impact on the user experience. Where should they invest, and what are the priorities? I think developers need to understand where technology is going. They need to ensure that they're staying abreast of it, but not necessarily getting too far ahead, right? Because again, we have so much change happening. How do we future-proof in such a way, and how do we phase the approach so that they can implement something knowing what's coming down the pike and be prepared for it when it does? for developers that are long-term, really we need to think about ongoing operations and maintenance, right? Once these technologies are implemented, how can they effectively and cost efficiently manage it? And how do we look at those implementations as part of an integrated system? I think that is one of the most significant challenges that we see. There's a number of technologies being incorporated. How do we bring that together in an effective way and manage that seamlessly, ideally through a type of single pane of glass approach? It's not easy with a number of disparate technologies. And then finally, I would say it's really about partnering and really exploring, again, as I mentioned earlier, some of those, highly differentiated models that are starting to pop up. But really developers, I think, need to think about how do they partner with the cities that surround their developments, the transportation entities, how do they partner with industry and technology firms, and really, explore innovative private sector and public-private funding models. I think that's really the fastest way to make an ambitious vision viable.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Heath, there's so much talk right now about smart and sustainable communities. And I know it's a huge thing in my community in Texas. What does that mean to you and the vision for Terravillas?
Yeah, Michael, as we talked about it on the front end, I mean, there's many different definitions of a smart city, but for us, again, it goes back to our DNA, and that's master design, so that plan again, embracing innovation and technology, and just making sure that what we're doing, in some sense, we're kind of future-proofing, right? So we build for the future. And to us, that just means not building just an A for a day to meet the market, but how do we incorporate those long-term sustainability goals and build in that level of resiliency to what we build really stands the test of time. And so we do that through a few different ways. One, as Ron kind of talked about, we set goals, right? We want to make sure that we set goals that are relatively hard to achieve. So if we think about our communities report, some people call that their ESG reports, but we have a 20% carbon reduction, and we start to identify how are we going to get to a 25% or 20% carbon reduction within the built environment. So we start looking at energy efficiency and able to achieve those goals. Not only do we have to incorporate some of the newest and latest and greatest technology, but it's that tracking to make sure that we can track, measure, and make informed decisions. So taking a look at data, how do we use that data appropriately? How do we use, some of the artificial intelligence to help make informed decisions is going to be important to us. From a water standpoint, a lot of people talk about water, and water across the nation is a precious resource. But when we think about water and water utilization, again, we have a 20% reduction, and that's both indoors and outdoors. So working with agencies like the EPA and their Water Sense program, or LEED, to make sure we align with LEED from a water conservation standpoint. But again, it goes back to data collection and how do we track and measure and utilize that data to make informed decisions in this ever-evolving, changing environment as things change. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we enhance and enrich our residents' lives. And we're doing that through many different ways. One, that carbon reduction, that carbon footprint. How do we make sure that we get people connected to places of interest and communities without having to get in their vehicles? So that dedication of 20% or more of open space within our communities. So we make our communities a little bit more walkable to enhance them to walk to and from those places of interest to include work. And by doing that, we're getting them out of the vehicles. So obviously those carbon emissions go down, and that helps us achieve that goal. So that's just one good example. We think about smart things. Most people don't think streetlights are very smart. If you drive by one, you might think it's pretty dumb. But you can make those smart, right? You can have all those sensors that are in them. They can become part of your wireless network, whether that's the advancement of 5G with the integration of the 5G technology that's in those streetlights, just tracking mobility, whether that's pedestrian or vehicular. How do we make sure that things like traffic signals, they're aligned and they change timely with the traffic during peak flow and during non-peak flow to keep traffic moving again, so cars aren't just sitting there emitting carbon that's somewhat detrimental to our environment. So those are just a few things that I can mention that we're really focused on. And then as we look into leaning into innovative ideas, not that solar's super innovative, but in our community, we're dedicating 4,000 acres right now for a 500 megawatts solar producing development that'll have 350 megawatts of battery backup. We're starting to explore things like small, medium nuclear reactors That's a green energy. Most people don't think it's green, but it's green. And we can help de-stress the grid by bringing that into our community. And should something bad happen to the grid, we can go into island mode. So all the residents and businesses that come into our community, they don't have to worry about losing power. And again, that's green power. That's things that we can somewhat guarantee to those residents, those commercial users that come into our space. So I can go on forever. You can give a developer a mic, we can talk for hours. So I'll stop there and move on to the next one.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. Matthew, I mean, kind of similar, but more in the private development. What are some of the benefits that private developments can derive from incorporating these smart city technologies, both in terms of sustainability, but most importantly, the quality of life for the residents?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of bolt on to what Heath just said, talking about, the solar farms essentially, right? I mean, not only can you put yourself in island mode by doing that in the event of a large scale power outage. I mean, we saw those in Texas, a couple of years ago where, city of Austin and, other places had no power for days, right? But when things are good and there is power, you can also then feed that energy back to the grid, right? So not only are you, protecting yourself in the event of, a widespread outage, but you're also able to, help supplement, what is in many cases around the country, a pretty stressed, situation, for power, from a power demand standpoint. But, I mean, there's a whole lot of different other areas as well. When you think about, just from a sustainability standpoint, when you, for those buildings that you go and you go get those LEED certifications, right? You can save 20 to 30% of the energy, right? That you would be using traditionally, otherwise, by implementing, technology within the building that is optimizing, energy performance based on supply and demand. Predictive maintenance in and of itself, right, can help drive increased net operating income within these private developments, because, somewhere between 30 to 40% or so in savings of, by using predictive maintenance, fixing things as they come up before before they break, and then you have to go spend even more money to fix things quickly. But those savings then allow you to go then deploy other solutions, right, that may be important, to visitors. I mean, otherwise though, I mean, just, of course, incorporating, strong building efficiency standards, leveraging LED lighting, like Heath said, but where you can also do things like dynamic lighting, where if you've got an outdoor space that, may be being used, a few hours a night, or, people may be walking around, being able to, bring lighting up to say, to light a general area, and then lower it some to be able to conserve that energy when no one is walking along the path. Those I think have also been, really, really effective ways at, both consuming less energy, but also kind of improving the natural landscape, rather than just having everything lit all the time. I think Heath also made a really good point, around just kind of that data piece, right? Because not only, do you have all that data, you got to be able to make sure that you're securing that data. And so leveraging, the strong cybersecurity practices to make sure that, the user information from your residents or visitors or, tenants or whatever is safe, is something that those people are going to be very interested in knowing that you're doing, right? Because we see all the time where, there's a hack here and a hack there. And so, securing the data and having that privacy by design approach, to everything that you're incorporating within the development, is going to go a long way in really helping convince, people that, you're doing what you should be doing with all of my data. Because, I think Tara said, at the start of hers, smart city kind of can go either way in terms of perception, right? And so, having broad stakeholder alignment, not just within the developer community or even the city, between the city itself, having that alignment in what you are doing, the problems that you are trying to solve, the impact that you're trying to drive is something that is meaningful to the resident, is extremely important. And knowing that their data is secure is a critical part along the way.
Awesome, great, thank you. We still have a few minutes left for the discussion portion, and so I have to ask, because this is an exciting question, and anyone can weigh in, but Tara, if you want to start, what are some of the upcoming smart city trends to be on the lookout for? What should we be looking out for?
Yeah, I think we've covered so much in terms of a number of the trends that are happening. And when you look at energy efficiency, as Matthew was mentioning, looking at different microgrids and energy sources, as Heath was mentioning, I think we're going to see a lot happen on the energy front. Significant focus on that, obviously, in the energy transition is a huge component. And so when we look at EVs and what's transpiring there, it's just going to be a significant change in terms of all the infrastructure required. And I think that's going to have a tremendous impact on communities in a variety of ways beyond just the actual infrastructure itself. There's behavioral aspects and what have you that will have to be taken into account as we think about how these communities function and flow. I think, as we look at, other utilities, I think that's another area of focus when we look at things like smart water and what technology can do to help, conserve resources, natural resources such as water, et cetera, where, developers are dealing with major increases as far as that is concerned, and it has an impact on residents as well. So water management is one area that I think, we're starting to see significant change in as well. Another key area, and I think Ron mentioned it earlier, but really thinking about the citizens piece to the equation, and how do we bring residents on the journey and really have them fully engaged in the solution sets that you're driving forward on. And I think, it starts with some of the initial executions like a citizen app, et cetera. But, what we're finding is that developers are thinking really creatively in terms of how do we bring the programming aspect into that? How do we actually really build that robust community, pulling in elements that harken back to the concepts of new urbanism, right? But creating these, these connected communities that have a strong social element, and that's driven by the technology associated with the apps and different programming aspects. So I think those are a couple of the areas that we didn't already hit on today that we're starting to see really come to the fore.
And I would just add on to that. I think we talked a lot about energy, so I'll kind of leave that one alone for for a bit. I think one of the things that we learned, though, coming out of the pandemic, right, is that there is a big difference. There's a large gap in as far as the digital divide goes. And so when cities and private communities are being built, I think that you're going to start seeing much more consideration going into place where outdoor hotspot kind of concepts, right, where people are incorporating the ability for anybody to come in and be able to access the internet, ensuring that that homes and apartments and condos are being built with high-speed internet in mind, so that hopefully we don't have another pandemic. But we got to be able to continue to provide education to our kids. We got to be able to continue to work, and ensuring that connectivity within these new developments I think is going to be really really critical moving forward. I think also the self-driving cars is going to be a big one as well. But more and more cars now are being released with autonomous driving. V2X is becoming something that's talked about all the time. And so I think the roads, especially in these greenfield developments, need to be kind of designed with that in mind, right? More accessible developments in general, both in terms of walkways and sidewalks and whatnot, but also the roads themselves, to be able to accommodate the different kinds of vehicles, whether that vehicle is a e-scooter or an e-bike, or a suburban driving down the road, right? There's going to be more and more of those very disparate kinds of vehicles that we need to be able to accommodate, and we need to be able to get people from point A to point B as quickly and efficiently as we can without consuming more and more, carbon emissions, or emitting more and more carbon emissions as a result. So, I think that there's lots to do and new things coming every day. But I think those are just a couple of good extra ones.
Yeah, I'll piggyback a little bit of what Keith said. So here in Lake Nona, Beep is the largest autonomous shuttle service provider in the country. Maybe larger than that, maybe in the world. I'm not sure, but there's Beep shuttles going up and down my streets every day, and it's very, very interesting. And it's very much a differentiator for what this community has to offer. But it just goes to tell the direction that we're moving to in terms of autonomous shuttles to get from point A to point B. So that's one area. Also coming here is going to be vertical takeoff and landing, EV takeoff and landing. They're working toward that as well. Williams looking at coming this way as well. And what a cool service. This is more of a jet service, so it's not the quote taxi service you might think about from going from one part of town to the other, but it's to take you from here in Orlando or Lake Nona over to the Space Coast or over to Tampa or whatever in a short period of time. I think drone delivery is going to be another thing that's coming along the way, and and lastly, I think one of the trends is going to be, we all know it, it's the EV charging. The demand for EV chargers may be at a level today, but it's going to be like a hockey stick in 5 years. How are we going to keep up with it, and how are we going to have the energy to support it in these private communities?
Great, thank you. Heath, is there anything you want to add, or would you want to dive into?
Yeah, I'd say they touched on a whole lot of it already, but I'd say one thing that we're going to start seeing, obviously, with the pricing pressures from a cost standpoint, from overall affordability, and can the end consumer really achieve from a housing standpoint today. I think that's going to start moving us a little bit more towards, I'd say, purpose-built modular housing. And not when we think modular housing, it's not housing of 20 years ago where it's the trailer you drag onto the site, but it's housing that's really focused on reducing overall waste, right? So we don't have the sticks from stick frame where 20% goes in the waste and that goes in the landfill. It's what can we do and embrace technology so it's purpose-built off-site, it comes on site, it's erected in less than 30 days, and it's to a higher standard and higher quality from every respect, from a structural standpoint, from energy efficient standpoint, et cetera. And it's something that the consumer wants and they can live with within their set environment. So I think that's going to continue to grow. There's been a lot of talk about that over the last decade, but I see that moving forward more and more as we really get into the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Awesome, great, thank you all. So it's interesting because one of the questions is about waste and garbage. So I know you touched on that a little bit, and it's very true. We can't forget about that with all this development happening and all these new things that we're all very excited about. What are some of the things that, how are you all looking at the waste and garbage management with these projects?
Yeah, I'd say that's a big one that we just touched on. How do we move to that kind of purpose-built environment where it's built off-site, you can reduce your waste, and if you can't do it from there, then you really have to manage that waste stream to make sure that, and it generally comes at a cost, to make sure we're working with our contractors. We have different trash bins that are on the job site where all the lumber goes, where all the metal goes. So that really turns itself into recyclable waste streams instead of just something that goes into the landfill. I'd say the other component of that, and I know Tara touched on this, I mean, it is so important that we work hand in glove with the local municipalities. The unfortunate thing about most municipalities, and not throwing them under the bus, but they are understaffed and they generally don't have the resources to dedicate toward innovative ideas and smart thinking and smart tech. So we can take that on in the private environment and just make sure that we engage with them, make sure that we help educate them on the overall benefits and the return on their investments. And so small things, just like from a water efficiency standpoint, right? If we can reduce our water by 30% within our houses, obviously that has an impact on the wastewater treatment facilities. So oftentimes we're required to build wastewater treatment facilities to standards that really reflect probably 130% more waste that actually comes into that. So we're spending a lot more money on those facilities, and we hand those off to the city, and the city has to operate that, right? So they're operating at a cost that really doesn't make any sense. And then where does that cost go to? That gets passed down to the consumer end user. So when we think about things like affordability and how do we work through those elements from smart technology, embracing that, working with local municipalities, at the end of the day, that enhances and enriches the lives of those residents that live in our communities.
Awesome, thank you. If just a reminder for the audience members, you can start submitting some of your questions and hopefully we can get to them. One of the other questions here, which I thought was pretty interesting as well, is what are some of the approaches and solutions that you have found when engaging the stakeholder with pre-construction or when proposing these large complex developments? And afterwards, the engagement that happens with the tenants and the residents of the community. And this could be for anybody.
I'll jump in on that. I think, communication is such a key component, and really, as I mentioned earlier, bringing everyone along on the journey, if you will. And so when you look at these projects, the more complex they become, the more touch points they have across the community, as Heath was just mentioning, in the city and what have you. And so how do you actually bring everyone together to ideate, to really come forth with a solution that's going to, check the box for a number of different use cases. What we do with Honeywell is create these charrettes where, various stakeholders all have a voice. We share different solutions in real time with them. We evolve it further based on their requirements. And at the end of the day, I think, everyone comes away feeling quite satisfied in terms of where we got to. But, it's something that needs to be considered on an ongoing basis, for smart communities that exist today. They're always implementing, new technologies, just as somebody mentioned, the Woodlands, one of the original master plan communities, right? And they continue to bring new technologies to the fore. But how do you actually then find a way to bring that out to the community in a way that is going to drive their adoption, get them excited about it, and also see it as a differentiator, so that helps to retain those residents and attract new ones. So the marketing communications piece becomes a central element, I think, in terms of how to approach this.
And I would agree with that. And I think that's, depending upon your point of view, arguably the most important, right? Because I think, the reality is that, cities and developers, private communities are doing lots of great things, right? But by and large, I think in a lot of cases, at least, the resident doesn't exactly understand, right, kind of what the benefit is, to them. They might just see a city spending money and why, and, but whereas, some of the engagements that we have had lately and, kind of our general approach, right, is that broad stakeholder alignment activity where, bringing in, whether it be, cohorts of, different, parts of, a city department or a private developer or the residents who live there, or, whatever the case may be, right, to really understand what are the high impact things that we can do that they can see, right, that will help benefit them in their daily lives. And I think when you kind of take a step back and just kind of thinking of smart city projects, I think that's been one of the challenges, right? Because they've been just little pilots, or that haven't really been broadly adopted, that are kind of able to be positioned as a success story. So it's just just a little nice thing that was done at some point in time. But kind of if you involve the community more broadly, through that consultative approach end to end from the very beginning, I think you've got a much better chance of kind of building that coalition, to really accomplish something transformational.
Awesome. Yes. Any other input? No? Okay. Well, this is another question for Tara. You mentioned that you're seeing an increase in consumer demand for smart city communities. They said that they are also seeing a counter trend with data privacy and ownership. How do we build smart communities while building checks and balances with regard to privacy? Can they? Or are we on the path towards a true surveillance society?
We're seeing the clients that we're working with readily putting these solutions in place that will limit that level of surveillance. I think we all saw some very high-profile smart cities a couple of years ago really, take a significant hit because of the surveillance issue. And so, you know, on one hand, it's becoming more and more of a reality, right? We're living in a world where, you know, there's cameras on every street corner and facial recognition is becoming, you know, par for the course, if you will. But I think, you know, the developers that we work with are very cognizant of that. And they have privacy concerns. They're bringing that, you know, to the fore. That is also what we're hearing from some of the stakeholders that we talked about earlier in terms of the charrette process. But we talk openly about it in terms of the surveillance issue. And I think that it's a bit of a blessing and a curse, if you will, right? Because in some instances, we have some residents that come forward and, you know, if there's an issue regarding safety and maybe high crime in an area or whatnot, you know, you'll oftentimes find residents can be a proponent of having some level of surveillance. And so what we try to do is come, you know, to a place where it's, again, that balancing act. What is the community looking for? What do they feel comfortable with? You know, what does the developer need to achieve as far as, you know, those goals for safety and security, et cetera. But usually we can find a place where I think it responds, you know, to the requirements of the broader group. And again, I think it's harkens back to that communication piece we talked about. You want to be open and transparent, and that is what is central to the equation. I think residents respond really well if they feel like they have a voice and they know precisely what's happening.
And I would just add to that.
Even if you tell people that you're going to anonymize their facial recognition, they're still not going to believe you, right? So it's like, I still don't trust. That's the hard part.
I would just say, it kind of brings me right back to, you know, what I said at the very beginning, you know, which is so many people think smart city equals surveillance, right? And that's not, you know, that isn't the case, right? You know, you could have no video management systems, no cameras, no nothing, right? And deploying innovation around, you know, traffic management or energy management or power management, you know, all of these things, right? You know, that enable efficiency, you know, operational efficiency and improve quality of life that have absolutely nothing to do with public safety, right? You know, but I think that there is the inclination to kind of go immediately there. You know, but, you know, to your point, Tara, I mean, you know, ultimately it's about, to me, it's about transparency, right? And being upfront and open about what problem you're trying to solve, and, you know, really trying to build a, you know, a secure way to solve that problem.
Awesome, thank you. Well, we are close to time, and I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. As we conclude, we encourage you to stay connected and feel free to reach out with any further inquiries. We appreciate your time and participation. And so until next time, take care and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Tara, Heath, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, everybody.